Y'all know what time it is. It is the one. It is the only In the Scope podcast with your boy, Joshua M. Hicks, senior writer for War Media. You can catch me on the Instagram and the Twitter at Josh M. Hicks Media. And I love this guy that I got on my show, man. This dude is like a renaissance man in his own way. He's done a lot of different things, dipped his hands in a lot of different pools, but at the end of the day, the dude is a multi-demographic guy that is very knowledgeable, very understanding of the game of sports in general, but also knows how to carry that not just on the court, on the fields and the respective forms, but transitioning it to life as a lifestyle in general. He is someone you would want to know, and I'm glad to have. He has some great stuff for us to share with us today. He is a VP of Performance and Strength when it comes to future. He's also a former Bulls trainer, strength and conditioning coach, as well as the same with Purdue. And he's in a whole bunch of other stuff. I can't even name the other things that he's doing. Just know that this guy's a really good guy and a brother of mine in the field, man. Josh Bonhotal. Josh, my guy, how you doing?
My man, I'm good. You know, I've been on a lot of podcasts, and the introduction I get from you is by far world class, by far the best, man. That the energy that you bring right off the jump, I need some of that.
No, man, I really appreciate it, man. I really do. And not to mention, you're a special guy, man. You're a special guy to me. We've always been communicating, keeping in touch. You've been doing a lot of great things, in your endeavors and in your leadership role. So definitely commended for that. I can't wait to talk about that later on in the show. But right now, we just got to get into a little bit of heavy hitters in the beginning of the show, man. I would like to assume, since you were a former Bulls trainer, you like to keep up with the Bulls over time, right? Like you've kept in touch with the Bulls so far, what they've been doing this season.
Man, I try to. You know what's funny, man? I am, but like it's hard for me to actually catch a lot of the games. And what was interesting, like when I was with the Bulls, I watched all the NBA. I never watched college basketball. So like I only, around March Madness tournament season, then you kind of realize like what's going on. Then I made the jump and I went to Purdue, and obviously early, like the first 2 or 3 years, it was still all my guys, that I coached. And then little by little, there's only, 2 or 3, then there's one. And obviously at this point there's none. But even during that time when I was at Purdue, now it flipped where it was like, it was really hard to watch the NBA, but I watch college all the time. And then fast forward to what I'm doing now, being, tech and startup world, it's hard for me to watch any, I watch Purdue more than anything. Like I watch that, like I'm their number one diehard fan because, I was the assistant with the Bulls and then I was the director at Purdue. So I spent 7 years building that program from the ground up. When I left, it was my former assistant that took over for me in my role. And actually this past year, he left to take another role. And so I helped place who they have currently. And so I still am like very attached to that program and having conversations with some of the current players and like helping them with what I see of, because that's a team where I think they can win the national title this year. So I'm like the outsider, like sending my 2 cents after every game of like what we need to do more of, what we need to improve and stuff like that. But Bulls, yeah, I've definitely been keeping an eye. The great thing is like, it's a good use of time again to watch Bulls games.
Yeah.
And you couldn't say that since probably when it was Rondo, D Wade and Jimmy and them, where if Rondo doesn't get hurt, by the way, that's a whole different trajectory because we're getting by Boston in that first round series.
Yeah.
And the next round, you never know. And you know how things work is now you're kind of doubling down and you're building around, but we lost that first round series, blew it up. And then what was it? Next 4 or 5 years. I mean, it's almost insufferable to, as much as I love them. I grew up diehard. I love everybody there, but and so now it's a good use of time again. So now it's like, okay, if they're on, I'm trying to tune in. But man, what DeMar is doing right now, I'm just watching him last night. Like, my goodness.
Yeah, DeMar's going crazy, man. And I'm glad you brought that up because you've trained an MVP in Derrick Rose. You were there during his prime D Rose years when he was on that other level. Now you got another MVP candidate coming in DeMar DeRozan, killing it. Which does DeMar DeRozan's season compare in any way, shape, or form to Derrick Rose's MVP year that you witnessed up close?
I mean, you can't ask me that question because you already know what my answer is going to be, and it's loaded with bias, of course. But like, I mean, I love everything DeMar is doing, but no, man, like Derrick Rose season, real talk, taking the bias out of it. That's one of the greatest individual seasons in NBA history. What he did that year, and but I will say, I think there's a lot of similarities in kind of what the campaign is, Derrick was really in a lot of ways the first guy to come along since Mike, to wear the weight of Chicago and to carry it. Like you saw that with all the free agents from like 2000 on, like back from the, what was it, like T-Mac and Grant Hill, where it's talk about like, oh, we're going to get two of them and we got none of them. But it was like the reality, and whether they want to say it or not, they didn't want the weight of MJ's statue sitting out front of that building, looking up at the banners. And that's what you're stepping in the sort of footsteps of, and Derrick was the first one to take that weight and deliver and, put the Bulls back on the map, because it was basically, I mean, you had the baby bull, and I coached that group as well, like Kirk and BG and Lou and all those guys. So I don't want to take away from them, but it was just that level to be MVP caliber and ultimately to be the MVP, putting the Bulls back on the map. And so I think you're seeing that with DeMar. What's interesting is, Derrick, obviously it was like a coronation. I wanted to say coming out party, but it wasn't a coming out party. It was a coronation, because it was like, he's the Chicago kid, and everything at Simeon and all of that. Obviously the 1 year number one pick, rookie of the year, all-star next year. And then, so it's just like third year, logical step, MVP. And so it was like going from, the prince to the king, or however you want to, whatever that is. And obviously, unfortunately, the injuries happened and things like that. But, I think with DeMar, what's interesting is like, it's like I don't even know if reinvention is the right word, but it's like DeMar's what people were saying, like, he's entering the late stages of his career, and all of a sudden he has put himself in a position and in a role for this like absolute like reemergence. But the similarity I see between the two of them, that I think, and watching Derrick up close and personal and seeing DeMar, much more loosely from afar, is well, one, they're doing it inside of the arc, which especially in today's game, you don't see that anymore. And so I think like DeMar is bringing that back to the game in a lot of ways. But it's like, it's not just the start of a game and the end of the game. Like Derrick would always do that. He would start us off strong and he's the closer. And you've seen that with DeMar, back-to-back game winners, all that sort of stuff. But it's all those moments in the middle of the game where like the fans are getting up and they're going to the concession stand and they're getting nachos and nobody's really paying attention, where in the NBA, if a team, even makes like back-to-back buckets on you, or certainly 3 in a row, that's a huge momentum swing in the dynamics of the game and who's going to win at the end. Derrick was that guy that anytime that happened, he ended that run right away. Like he was the ultimate run stopper. And I think you're seeing that with DeMar, is like, if another team starts to get a bit of a rhythm, they start to, get a couple buckets back to back, get a couple stops on the other end, let's just find him and he can go and get it. And with that mid-range game, he can just kind of walk you into his spot and get that shot. And Derek had a lot of that. He could, because he was so deadly getting to the rim, you had to give him a little bit of space there. And so he could almost walk you into that mid-range, which he really, from year 1 to year 3, worked a lot to develop. So no, man, it's been fun, and it's been eerie because beyond just DeMar, it's like the team as a whole reminds me so much of that team my very last year, which was Derek's MVP year, which was the year we lost to Miami in the conference finals. LeBron's first year in Miami. Dallas goes on and wins it that year. But the whole team dynamic, and I've not been around the guys, but I still have close friends in the organization, and they've said it too. It was like back at that time, my last team, like if we went out, if we ever went out, it was, we were 14 deep, 15 deep. It wasn't just a few players. It was like the whole team. And everyone enjoyed hanging out together, not just on the court, but off the court. And I always tell people that was the closest knit team I've ever been a part of at any level. That includes like high school basketball, like YMCA ball, college, everything. And that's really remarkable because you typically don't see that at the pro level, but when you do, it's really special. And I think you're seeing that with this group, and you're seeing it's like bench mob 2.0. There was not, everybody wants to call, if any team has a good bench, they want to call it the bench mob now ever since, 2010. But that's the original bench mob. But the thing that made us so great that year was anytime, whatever it is, it's around under 6-minute timeout in the first quarter, and now you go to your bench, but certainly the start of the second quarter. If we had a lead, we stretched the lead because our bench was always going to drive your bench. If you had a lead, we were going to close the gap. And even if our bench was in with your starters, they could match up. You know what I mean? And I think you're seeing that, but it's like, it's the love for one another. It's the unselfishness. And I think it starts with obviously DeMar being that veteran guy, but Lonzo reinventing himself. He's kind of been through it. He's had some dark moments now. And now I think you see that of like how important just winning is to him. And then Zach, I think Zach's just everything I've ever seen from him. He's just been that guy from the moment he stepped in, where it's like, this dude's a flat out superstar, but the way he carries himself in person is just like an unassuming, humble dude. Don't get it twisted. He got the swag, he's got and he knows he's a badass, but he doesn't, he doesn't like carry himself as though he's like, he's better than you, or, you know what I mean? And so when you have 3 guys at the top like that, it just trickles down. Vooch, all those guys. So
you just briefly talked about how close knit of a team that 2010 team was when they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Give us an example of one of your favorite moments of hanging out around those guys to describe the close chemistry. What's one of your favorite moments, man? Drop a couple stories on us.
That's the toe. You put me on the spot there. That's like 11 years ago. I'm trying to think of like, what are the different stories? It's just a lot of this stuff of like, even just, and cause at that time, like, I was young too. I'm the same age. Heck, I was younger than half the guys. I was 27. So, you definitely like the moments. I would say I remember in particular, like right before the All-Star break, our very last game was a TNT game against San Antonio. And San Antonio had the best record in the NBA that year. We were just starting to hit our stride where like people were now talking about us as a legitimate contender. Cause you got to remember the year before that, we were an eight seed, lost in 5 games to Cleveland. And then the year before that, Derek's rookie year, we were a 7 seed, lost in 7 to Boston. So we, 7 or 8 seed the past 2 years. Going into that year, outside of our building, the expectations probably weren't necessarily there. And now we're hitting our stride. It's Tibbs' first year. And so that was a big moment, I think our guys really wanted that. They knew that was kind of the moment of like, yeah, we're playing well, but if we're really going to win a championship, that's who we got to go through. San Antonio, I mean, Pop, Duncan, Tony Parker, all them. And we dominated that game. I don't remember what the final score was. I think, it ended up being a close game as you would expect. It's the Spurs. But overall, we controlled that game. Guys really stepped up. There were moments where, the Spurs were going to win the game. And I just remember, because then it was like, we're all going into All-Star break straight from that. And I'm the young guy. So it's like, yeah, like you can go out with guys, but you kind of got to be discreet about it a little bit. But interestingly, I always thought, the fact that you could have those type of relationships where I can go out with a guy, or I can and still like keep that line, or we can go to dinner, actually helps you coach them that much better, especially when they have their low moments, because they know you care about them on a deeper level. But anyways, I remember we get back into that locker room and they're just going nuts, and like I think it might have been Booze. He just looks at me and one of my boys, who I won't mention his name, but we're standing there and we're kind of the young guns. Boo's like, Josh, where we at tonight? We're going out. And I'm like, oh man. He was like, no, Josh, you call it. You say where we're going, And so then I think me and my other boy, like we kind of set up a couple spots, but it was just like, that was probably one of the most memorable nights, because we had that opportunity where it's like the last day of school almost, where we don't have another game. There's not, everyone's having this break, well-deserved. So we could all go kind of hang out and kick it. And, I think we ended up going to 3 different spots that night. And it was literally the entire team. Like every single player on our team was there, handful of our staff. And it was just the enjoyment to be around each other. The love for one another, you felt it. And what was so cool was like, I think that was one of the first moments where it was like, we walked in places, man. And like, I come from a small town. I never was that good at basketball myself. I wasn't, and we're walking in places. I'm like, man, it feels like we're the Beatles or, something like that. The city because the city of Chicago when you win and when you do it the way that we were, like as a team, and you get gritty, like Stacey King always talk hard hat, lunch pail, like, with Taj especially. And we had those type of guys, man. The city of Chicago is a blue collar, city. They love their sports, but they want to see you do it the right way. Cause it's a city where I think everyone looks out for each other. Everyone can, and so it was like, we had that team, and to just like go around the different places that night and to just step back in the awe of, how just that buzz around the city. And actually like a few of the Spurs guys that met us out. So that was just kind of cool to see that dynamic from some of those guys that are legends, and like how they carried themselves. And you saw the respect and love that they had for, in particular, Derek and Joakim, you know what I mean? Which was just, as like a low man on the totem pole, was kind of cool to see.
I was gonna say, Derek stepped out.
Derek, he'll keep it. He'll definitely keep it low key. If he steps out, which is good though. It's like, and that's how I think that's the way to, and especially now, man, with everything. Yeah. But it's like, finding that balance, and I think a lot of those guys and that team was just so mature across the board and just carried themselves at such a high level. And so that's where, like, you never saw like any of the foolishness that sometimes you see it's like we can go out and have a good time without, being stupid or being, you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like, so, and, it's just kind of interesting because people they they judge you the second they see you at a restaurant or they see you, right away. And today's like, I'm going to take a picture, I'm going to video you, and you're kind of under the microscope, but it's like, finding ways that, you can still kind of go and enjoy yourself, I think is important, but keep yourself insulated. And
No, that's cool. That's cool. I rarely hear about Derek D. Rose stepping out and doing things. So so for you to bring that out, I was like, he stepped out. All right, cool. All
I
right.
think he's always, he's gonna keep it, which is good. He's gonna keep it, very discreet, and also like he's not gonna step out very much, like
Right.
it was like, and so but I think like that's probably why that night stuck out to me because the majority of the time, and especially that year, he's on his climb. It was more like, if anything, we're gonna grab a dinner in like a room that's closed off in the back of a restaurant, type of thing. So it was cool that it was like, that's a night where all of us can kind of go and enjoy ourselves.
Everybody listening right now, you're listening to my guy Josh Bonhotal. Josh, we're sticking on. We're going more to the fitness side of things now. And DeMar DeRozan, we talked about how he's been killing it all year long, and he's been, you briefly talked about the correlations between this team versus your 2010 team that you were a part of. I think what really stands out about DeMar DeRozan, not just through this year, but his career in general, was he doesn't miss many games. He's very durable.
Mm-hmm.
The team's already played 60 games this year. He's played in 56 of them. Like, he only missed 4 games all season long.
Yeah.
When you talk about keeping up with that durability, especially when you're playing so much, but heading into an all-star break like we did, talk about the importance of fitness-wise, staying durable, how to stay healthy, so that way your body can maintain all that wear and tear that it's going through, even through a 60-game schedule so far. And you still got a whole nother, for at least for the Bulls, hopefully 30-plus games because of the playoffs. How do you maintain that?
Yeah. So, it's interesting because I think you've very much seen a pendulum in that space, especially elite sport. And I do think it's starting to come back is, there are incredibly high demands that go to that, physically, both in terms of, the just overall volume and wear and tear that comes from that. But then the forces that, especially when you think about like a Zach LaVine and in my day, Derrick Rose, the forces that these athletes, these guys are able to generate is unlike anything, most of us are capable of. And so even to do the exact same things for, there's kind of there's an effect of like that absolute output of like this big explosive burst or this very quick stop, change of direction, things like that. And so to be able to consistently do those things, and the thing I always talk about is like there's 2 levels to it. Is like, I think you have some of your guys and I've never coached Zach, so I don't want to speak on anything to, his actual training, but just looking at him physically, athletically, a guy like Zach, a guy like Derek is, a lot of these gifts they have already. So when you're thinking about training them, it's more, how do we allow Derek to go and just be Derek? How do we allow, like, game after game, he can be at or as close to 100% of who Derrick Rose is physically, because just off that, he has an advantage. And then you have other guys who maybe they don't have some of that same natural athletic ability. And so you are, training a little differently to push the envelope to also drive those physical capacities a bit more. Like when you get a Derrick Rose, you don't go, hey, D, come over here, I'm going to make you faster. Like Derrick was the fastest basketball player in NBA history by our testing, at the point at which he joined, with the Bulls. So
Mhm.
it's a little different. Whereas, you'll get some other guys where you're like, okay, hey, like you're pretty fast right now, but there's a window we can really develop you. But I think the overarching thing is, one, you got to meet each individual guy where they're at, where their level of training and fitness is. And it's going to be different for all of these guys. Like, how much have they been exposed to training? And when I refer to training, I mean, a lot of your lifting weights and conditioning and speed and agility work and recovering. Also, what are their lifestyle habits? Because if they're still figuring it out in terms of, really prioritizing their nutrition and eating healthy and prioritizing their sleep and, things like that, that's going to alter what type of stress that you can put them under, what type of loads and volumes you can expose them to. But I think ultimately your objective is to be able to do what someone like DeMar is doing, first of all, of like playing every game. That's a pretty clear sign to me of like, he's putting the work in the off season, and he's not just kind of like showing up and doing some fluff workouts, but he's really like going and stressing all his systems. And one of the things that, we always did in my time in Chicago, and then my time at Purdue, which, by the way, in 7 seasons that I was there, we had a total of 6 games missed across all of our players. So it would have been 2,511 total game opportunities that we had 6 games missed due to non-contact and soft tissue injuries, which are the ones that you still can't control,
Yeah.
but you try to influence. And what I attribute to the success that we had, and so what I would look at a guy like DeMar, why does it happen, is one, in the off season, they push the envelope. Like they train and they train hard and they train aggressively. And, a quote that it always sticks with me because it sat right outside of my office door in the Berto Center, our old training facility with the
Mhm.
Bulls. So I saw it every day for 4 years when I walked into my office and said, the time will come when winter will ask what you were doing all summer. And
Mhm.
that quote like very much rings true of like, you see someone like DeMar, and as the season has progressed, he's actually, and there's probably a combination here, honestly, is he's getting stronger. But I would venture to guess a lot of guys he's going up against, maybe they're starting to feel the effects of the long season, or at least they're feeling it more than he is. And so that's where you see his separation coming, later in the season, is like having that aggressive off season. And to the point, and when I was at Purdue, I think our guys would even think I was crazy at times, but we would train to a point where it was like, we were so aggressive at times where they might have some small breakdowns in the offset. Like we might do a 1 step back for 3 steps forward type of thing, because we also realize, and what I always talk to our guys about, if it's June, July, for us, our season started in, mid-November, we're 5 months away from playing a game. And so like the other thing, what's interesting, because everyone's all big into recovery, I would like lose my mind on our guys if they got into a cold tub in the off season, or they did a Normatec, or they did like this different recovery stuff, because I was like, what are you recovering for? Like, we don't
Mhm.
have a game for 5 months. And so I think like what's interesting is like this pendulum, as I was talking about, is like, we have all this data and technology to tell us about, our heart rate variability, all the different loads we're in, distances that guys are running during practice, and velocities and forces, and, all these things. And now we have this whole category of recovery modalities. And so you almost see that get like overused, especially in the off season, to where like we're constantly recovering after every single workout. When we're not playing a game, we're not doing anything where we have to be at an optimal performance yet. And we're like placing this huge emphasis on what this data is telling me about like the loads that we're under. But you're missing the point that when we get into the season, we're about to ask these guys to be under like such extreme loads that we have to do something to prepare them for it. And so the reason why in the off season, like I would shy away from having our guys do cold tubs or, any of that different type stuff outside of maybe, like massage and soft tissue work, some things there, is it actually stunts your body's natural kind of recovery process. So what happens when you train, so to get stronger, to get fitter, to get, whatever it is, what you're doing is you are applying a certain level of stress to your body. And so that stress creates breakdown. So you actually see a dip in performance, and where that improvement, why you get stronger, is from sort of your body's process to your body wants to achieve homeostasis. So bringing you back to kind of a new norm, so to speak, because it essentially recognizes, hey, we just did this work. It was too much. So now my muscles have broken down, this and that. So now my body goes, okay, I need to prepare for a little higher, sort of tolerance or workload. Does that make sense? So, and that's why you see, like, if you don't work out for 6 months and all of a sudden you come back to the gym and you try and do an hour workout, you're gonna be debilitated for 2 weeks. Like, you're not going to be able to walk because your body has lost the ability to endure kind of that capacity. So with a guy like DeMar, I think it's that, like, he's pushing the throttle in the off season. He's really getting after it, which is critical. And then, I think as you get in season, now it's about the consistency of it. And so both with the Bulls and at Purdue, many of our players, I mean, literally they would train every single day, beyond just their like basketball practice or games. Like, we would train, we would do lifts right before tip off. I had guys with the Bulls and at Purdue, they're leaving the weight room with me 30 minutes or 60 minutes before we tip, but we adjust that workout based on how they're feeling. So if it's a day, and I'll just use DeMar as an example, and I don't know what he's doing. I don't know if he's doing game day training or stuff like that. I would venture to believe he's doing at least some of it. But like, maybe it's a day where he comes in and he says, man, I'm feeling really sore. I'm stiff. I'm, this and that. We'll adjust that lift for that day to make it more about just moving you through some full ranges of motion, pretty light, but just getting your blood flowing to help loosen you up. And part of the goal is psychological, that just from the time he starts to 15 minutes later when he walks out, because we're not going to do a much, especially if somebody's feeling like that, he just feels better. He's more confident. He's looser. But then if it's a day where you're feeling pretty good, and especially because you've had a great off season, now you have a higher capacity in season, even with all the stress, to do more. We'll actually do, like, potentially, if it's a lift, let's use a squat, for instance, we might actually do some heavy squats, but you're only going to do, maybe 2 to 3 reps. And it's not a 2 to 3 rep max. It's not like you're maxing out. It's pretty heavy, but it's like 90% of what you could do. So like, you still have 2 reps left in the tank, if that makes sense. But what that does is it really excites your nervous system and your fast twitch muscle fibers. So doing things like that, or doing things that are really fast. So like jumping, different plyometrics, different like Olympic lifts, like a hang snatch, for instance. And those things, what those will do on a day that I'm feeling good is it'll actually like kind of potentiate my system, it's called, which is almost giving me like a turbocharger when I go into the game. Like, in fact, we would do a lot of that stuff with Derek, especially his MVP year. He started to be like, game day was like his favorite day to train before the game, because it was a way in which he could kind of get loose and get ready for the game. So, kind of long-winded, but wrapping it all up here, I think the other part of why DeMar is able to, as an outsider, why I look at DeMar and I would venture to guess he's having success is because throughout the season, even amongst all the stress, he's actually doing more work. Where oftentimes people say, hey, you have all this stress, so you just need to rest. Like you need to do less. And where you miss the point is it's about how you distribute that workload. So doing different, like if you're just doing more of the same, then yes, absolutely, you're going to break down. And so that's where, from a training perspective, picking your days where, one day it might be light and it's more about mobility, range of motion, and there's not much of a stress in terms of like the weight or the load that I'm moving. Another day is going to be more about speed of movement. How fast am I moving? Another day might be more about just strength. So how much weight am I moving, but still keeping the volumes low. And that actually kind of like helps you over time, because now you're varying those stresses. Where you see breakdown is because it's more monotony and it's just a lot of the same type of stress, which is why you see like endurance athletes, like marathon runners, triathletes, swimmers, they'll break down because they're just doing too much of the same thing. So you can see that with basketball athletes if they're not complementing everything that they're doing on the court to practice, to get shots up, to play games with the, medicine ball circuits and throws and lifts and mobility and yoga. And so.
Okay. Yeah, obviously, as a former athlete, I can relate to some of that. Although I hated lifting, could not stand lifting to save my life. So whenever we had lift sessions, I was like, oh man, I just want to I was like, forget this. I'm trying to chill. But it makes a lot of sense, right? It makes a lot of sense to put in the extra work and effort so your body can respond at the proper moments when it needs to respond. Yeah. And it's amazing that you said that, because you also talked about how, real briefly, how while you're at Purdue, you only 6 games per se.
That was in 7 years.
Yeah, in 7 years with injuries. What specific methods did you implement coming from Chicago with the Bulls to Purdue that helped create that trajectory where that durability component factor became a positive for you guys?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, the biggest thing I learned from Chicago that I was able to bring to Purdue is just relationships. And I think that's where I was really fortunate, because working for the Bulls was actually my very first job out of college. Now, I did a ton throughout college to put myself in position to have that opportunity. So it wasn't just like I, got lucky and it fell into my lap. Obviously there's always luck involved with something like that, but I mean, I worked my ass off to get there. But that, a lot of times, like, say if I want to work in the NBA, I'm probably going to go through the ranks, maybe even work in high school, then work in college, mid-major, then high major, then, and traditionally, I think a lot of times that's how you think of it, because also as a player, that's how you go. And so for me as a coach, I actually went to essentially the top first with the Bulls. And as part of that, I saw some great teams. I saw some individual great players. And then also, interestingly, all 3 years I was there, we had the oldest player in the NBA. The first 2, it was Lindsey Hunter, and the last one was Kurt Thomas. Mm-hmm. So you had guys like that just could pour wisdom into me as players. And then you had all the people, the Tony Kukoc, the Bill Wennington, the Stacey Kings, the Scottie Pippen, John Paxson, that were, still very much a part of the organization. So I'm having conversations with them every single day. I'm going to dinner with them on the road. And the biggest thing I learned during my time with the Bulls was like, the foundation of everything that you do is the relationships that you have with each guy individually. Because out of that, you build trust. And what I think people take for granted at times in the coaching world is sort of this, idea of like, well, I'm the head coach, so you have to listen to me, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm the coach, so you don't speak to me that way. No. I'm a man, you're a man. And like in this case, you know, like
Right.
in obviously female sports too, but I'm a human being, you're a human being. My title does not matter. Your title does not matter. You know what I mean? And it does ultimately at some point of like, we need to follow and rally behind our head coach. And that's who's going to like lead the charge and direct us. And we need to be on the same page. Um, but how you get there is by building relationships. And so I would say that was the biggest thing that I brought from what I learned during my time with the Bulls to come to Purdue was, and it's changing now, but back then, you know, in the college setting, especially within, and frankly, this might've been why you hated the weight room. And I don't want to speak for your experience, but I know it's common for a lot of people was like, you're here because you have to be here and you're going to do what's on the workout because you have to, because if you don't, there's a consequence. Like if you don't, you got to run suicides. If you don't, you know, and you're not necessarily there because you want to be there. You're not necessarily there because you believe in it. You're not. And if it comes down to it and I say, you know, Josh, here's what we got today. This and you're like, well, why? At the college level, ultimately, I could be like, because I said so. Just do it, man. If you do that at the NBA level, do you know how quickly I'm gonna get cussed out by like, or I say, yo, Brad Miller, I'm gonna fine you if you don't do this. First off, he's gonna write the check right there, and I've just tarnished that relationship with him. You know
Right.
what I mean? And so, you know, you, in order to be effective at the professional level, you have to build relationships with these guys. You have to show, just like any other human being, that you give a shit about them, that like you genuinely care about them as a person first, and you
Mm-hmm.
have their best interests in mind. And what's unique is, as a performance coach, I don't control playing time. So it's in my best interest, even if I disliked every single player that I had, it's in my best interest actually for every single one of them to improve. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
in some ways, sitting in that role probably gives you an advantage because like they can't really get pissed at me about their playing time. They can get mad at the head coach. But you know, I think then that just creates the environment where now you've earned the right to coach them, not just
Right.
because of your title. And then from there, the second piece of it is taking what I call an N=1 approach. And that's like truly dialing down to the individual. And the first part of that is the relationship. Who is this person? You know, what where are they from? Like culturally, what is their background? Where did they grow up? Who are their parents? Who are the most influential people in their lives, whether it's family members, past coaches, friends? Like get to know them, get to know those people. What do they want? Like what do they love? What are they passionate about? What do they fear? You
Mm-hmm.
know, what are their insecurities? Because if you don't understand those things, you're not truly going to be able to help that person. Ultimately, being a coach is about transporting this person in front of you. Like if I'm a coach and I'm coaching you, Josh, my job is to transport you from where you are now to where you want to go.
Right.
That's like the simplest definition of a coach. And so a lot of times people look at the mechanics of it and they see X's and O's basketball or skill or lifting weights. And it's like, yes, that's the vehicle of it. But there's such a huge psychological component, you know, which first comes from building that trust to now be able to have the right to have an impact and have an influence. And, you know, a lot of it is building the mindset and building the confidence. And so, you know, starting from there, building that relationship, getting to know each guy, how they tick, how they think, you know, all those sorts of things now allows me as a coach to meet each one of them individually where they're at, because it doesn't matter what the science tells me that I should put together as this person's workout. That's part of it. And I need to take that into account, but I also need to take into account who they are and will they even believe in this thing that I'm telling them to do yet? Will they enjoy, like, what is their relationship? Like, so if I coach someone like you and you're like, man, Josh, I hate the weight room. And frankly, Derek was that guy. Like Derek had never really formally lifted weights before he got to us. He just, and that's most young guys. Like it's changing now. Obviously you have more resources at the grassroots level. But he'd just go play basketball. And so the weight room freaked him out when he first got to us. And what we did, and the same thing I would do if I was working with you. First, I want him to like feel comfortable, feel, sounds corny, but like feel safe in the weight room.
Yeah.
And then like enjoy it, have fun. So like, I actually don't care what you do to start out because we got to start somewhere. So like, what are some of the things that you like to do? We can probably still mix in a few things that, you need to do. But let's do some things to start to establish your confidence in an area where maybe you're not overly comfortable, you're not overly confident, and let's make it fun. Like I'm going to crack jokes with you. What music do you want to listen to? Even if it's music I hate, I'm going to throw it on. And then I'm going to tell you, man, your music is trash. I need to school you up on some 90s hip hop. You know what I mean? Like, but like, we're going to have fun. I'm going to get you laughing. I'm going to get you. And now you have trust. And then now I'm going to say, hey, and here's why we're doing this thing. Here's what, and this thing over here, I think it would really help you. And here's why I think it would help you. And, blah, blah, blah. And so starting to educate you, starting to empower you, and you have to do that at the pro level. And so, bringing that to the college level over time, the other thing it does, the more I educate you, what your body feels like better than any data, any, watch or wearable, like, how you feel, and I can't argue or question how you feel, but if I educate you and I arm you with the tools to understand based on how I feel, here's what I feel like doing. And here's some of the things that I've noticed in the past have helped me when I feel this way. And that's a lot of what we would do with the Bulls that translated to Purdue was like, interestingly in season at Purdue, we were the only team in college basketball. There was not a single lift that was on our like weekly schedule. There was not a single lift that was quote unquote like mandatory. But yet, on average, our guys came and saw me anywhere from probably like 4 to 7 days a week. Any other team, maybe they have 2 mandatory lifts. It's half hour, 45 minutes in season. The whole team's doing the same thing. But what we did was like, again, that DeMar DeRozan example, the consistency of it. The more you train, the more you can train, the higher your tolerance is, the more you can go out and do in the game, the quicker you recover and bounce back, all those sorts of things, especially at that level. They're younger, so they're still developing. So we could actually improve their strength and athleticism throughout the course of a season by doing that. But the biggest piece was you made them a partner in the process. And so as a result, over time, like when they're a young freshman and they're still figuring it out, I'm kind of telling them like, hey, here's our plan for the day. What do you think about this? How do you feel? And then maybe I'd tweak a few things here and there based on how they'd feel. Or other days I'd say, hey, I know you're not probably going to feel like doing this, but just trust me on this today. Let's just do it because I want you to know how this does feel, for future situations when you feel this way. And oh, by the way, we're playing a mid-major team today that's, 1-8 so far on the season. And so like, if you lifting before a game is the reason we lost, like we have much bigger problems anyways. So using some of those scenarios to teach, to educate, and then it starts to translate to, instead of me saying, here's what we have, then it goes to, what do you feel like doing today? Because now they have some education of like, based on where I'm feeling, based on where we're at in the season, here's what I feel like doing. Now I would still come in to guide them and say, hey, that sounds good, but really we probably should move a little bit of weight today because, and I'm going to speak back from my time with Purdue. We got Rutgers tomorrow. they're, 2-10 in the Big Ten so far. They're good now. I wouldn't do it now.
Right.
But so like, let's maybe get you a little sore here because we'll still be fine tomorrow. But we got Michigan State next week, so we can't do it then, and so picking those spots. And then it ultimately turns into literally me asking a guy, hey man, what are you going to do today? By their junior, senior year, they're literally telling me what they're going to do, but it's because we've educated them. And as it relates to injury and health and performance, that is taking into account the psychological piece, which ends up driving the physical, the physiological of how I feel. So if I feel I have ownership and choice in the decision, I'm doing things that I believe work, I'm doing things that I've chosen to work, then the likelihood that they do work actually increases, because I also have kind of a environment, psychologically, hormonally, that is favorable to recovery. Like if I'm just, and I don't know, but when you were coming in the weight room, I imagine a lot of days is like, Josh, here's the program. I don't care what you feel like. This is what we're doing today. And you probably try and sneak in the corner and like, you're supposed to have 10 reps, try and figure out a way to do 7 reps. But what you had there is you had a lack of control. And so what comes with that lack of control is an increase in anxiety and an increase in stress hormones. And throughout the course of a very long season, the more stress hormones, the more cortisol you have, the further you're breaking down actually from when you go out and you have a double overtime game. You're going to break down even more because you have, the associated stress around you is bigger. And so that's a lot of stuff that we would do even beyond training, is how do we create that environment around you, the belief, the confidence, the energy, so that we are minimizing those stress hormones as much as possible, which then also is going to lead into you making better decisions about what you eat, you sleeping better, because when you lay your head on the pillow, you're actually able to fall asleep. So, it's funny because at the core, like if you just came and you saw some of the stuff, especially by year 6, year 7, when I was at Purdue, and you saw and you're like, man, Vince Edwards and, PJ Thompson, Dakota Mathias, these guys who are seniors are literally just walking in the weight room in season, and they're telling the strength coach what they're going to do. On the surface, that seems like very like simple. And you're like, man, what are you doing? But it's like, it is simple at its core, but it's complex. Like there's levels to it. So it's like, even, on a day after a bad loss, or a day that a guy has been through a lot of stuff, there will be days where the workout itself is less important than just changing their mood state from the time they walk in to the weight room to the time they leave. So like I would see a guy come in, and we did this in the NBA as well, is they're out of character. They're walking real slow. They're grumpy. They're quiet. They're, head down. They don't even, I say hi to them. Hey, Josh, what's good, man? Give me one of these.
Yeah.
Okay. I know it's one of those days. Now the workout is less important. We can use that as a vehicle, but let me crank on the music you like. Let me give you a little bit of space, but gradually, like, let me see if I can kind of like get you to crack a smile, get you to laugh, get you to, do those things. And so, it's interesting, man, but I really do believe it's the relationships, it's the trust, and it's the ownership, the choice that you give them, that drives a lot of those outcomes. And then if you just kind of have a sound program with that, together with some consistency, you're going to have a lot of success.
You are very, I can say you're a very wise guy when it comes to the things that you put out there into the world and on social media and everything. Talk about, from a leadership perspective, who was the mentors that helped get you to become the leader in your respective field that you became?
Yeah. So, and I would say I'm fortunate because I probably have way too many to be able to like give due credit and list them all. So I'll highlight two in particular, and it's Al Vermeil and Eric Helland, who those were my two mentors with the Bulls. Al was, and I was fortunate to spend 1 year with him. It was actually my first year when I was an intern. And Al was still around. He was in a consultant role with the Bulls, but he was the Bulls' first ever strength coach in the mid 80s. Before that, he was Bill Walsh's strength coach with the 49ers. So, Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Roger Craig, that whole group. So Al Vermeil, and by the way, he's Dick Vermeil's younger brother. Al Vermeil is, and I don't think it's changed, I could be wrong, he's the only coach to have both Super Bowl ring with the 49ers, and then he has 6 NBA championship rings with the Bulls. So, and he was someone who really, the things he was doing in the mid 80s, teams at a high level are just starting to do now. Like, I mean, he's just a trendsetter, 30 years ahead of his time. And then Eric was his first ever assistant. Eric, he hired when, I think Eric was probably 22. So this would have been late 80s. And by the mid 90s, Al kind of handed over the reins to Eric. And so, a lot of those championship years, Eric was kind of running everything in terms of the training and all that sort of stuff. And honestly, it was really historic. Like the things that they were doing with those guys, with the Horace Grants and the Scottie Pippens and the, Luke Longley, Jason Kirk, like Caffey, all these guys, to BJ, to develop them was just absolutely incredible. And, and then Eric who was my boss for my entire time with the Bulls. But, I think both those guys, it was, again, getting back to what I talked about right before this, made me realize that, all this knowledge that I thought I had about how to train someone, how to develop an athlete, how to keep them healthy. First of all, like, I didn't know anything. I thought I knew everything. I didn't know anything. But they made me realize that, like, actually none of that mattered without the human side of it, the relationships. And, I think something that always stuck out with me with Al is, like, he would always tell stories of his time with the 49ers and the, the Jordan era, the 6 championships. And, like, I mean, he was literally having, I think even weekly, he would have the entire team, 15 guys, over to his house, and his wife would, together with his wife, they'd cook dinner and they'd have all the guys over. And, but he taught, and he did the same thing with the Niners. And he just talked about, it was like, that's the reason why he was able to coach them. That's the reason why he was able to, have an impact with them and an influence. And, he also, I think one of the things that always stuck out to me that he taught me was how you treat the people who, quote unquote, like, work for you. And I always try to be careful of, like, I don't view it as someone, yes, like, maybe I manage people technically, but I never view it as like they work for me. It's, they work with me. We work,
Right.
we work together. And I learned that, and I saw that with Al. One of the things he said to me during our time together, it was like, he just told me, he was like, Josh, when you're in the role, when you're the head guy, and everything ultimately falls on you, but now you have an assistant, maybe you have some interns, anything that happens under your watch, like if they make a mistake, if they fail, if they, screw something up, it's always your fault. Does not matter. Even if it looks like it's their fault, even if, like, you told them 10 times how to do the thing and they still screwed it up, or, whatever it is, it's your fault. It's never their fault. It's always your fault. If a head coach comes down to you, a GM, whoever, you always own it. That's on you. Because he was like, you got to realize, like, it's your fault because maybe you didn't prepare them for it. Like, you put them in a position, but you didn't prepare them. You didn't communicate effectively enough, or you put them in a position to do something that they weren't ready for. And you should have known better than to put them in that position. And if they stepped out on their own and just kind of did something, well, you didn't teach them to have the right judgment of like what's their call and what is not. And he also said, kind of the flip side of it is anything that goes well, put them on a pedestal. It's about that. Even if like you did 90% of it, if they did 10% of it, let them shine. It's not about you. And especially in the sports world, that's so uncommon. It's such a, there's scarcity around these roles of like being a head coach, being a GM, being whatever it is. And so, there's a natural like dog eat dog mentality, like a zero sum game. And so it's easy to get in those worlds and feel as though, that's what's normal. And that's what you got to do, to make it, and to like be insecure and to be scared that like, man, well, what if, my assistant starts to look better than me and like now they're going to fire me, or they're, whatever it might be. And what I learned from Al, so be it. Like, that's good. Like, I want my assistant to be better than me. And what stuck out about Al was like, he also lived it. He did it through example. Like, one of the things I always love to share about him, and I kind of alluded to earlier, but in the middle of those championships, and this is the greatest dynasty maybe our world has ever seen with, the Jordan Bulls. Literally, they were bigger than the Beatles. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So in the middle of that dynasty, and Al basically goes to, ownership and the GM and kind of is like, hey, Eric's too good to be my assistant. He's outgrown the role. We need to let him lead here. We need to let him have ownership. And Al kind of like stepped aside so that Eric could be the head guy, because he realized if he's just my assistant, he's not growing anymore. He's not developing. And I think that can be, it's really uncomfortable. Like, you got to be really vulnerable, and it takes, and you got to have a lot of confidence and assurance in yourself. But it was like, I think that's also what allowed Al to be so effective himself, is like, he had that confidence. And it was sort of like, if at some point, like, you guys decide that someone else is better or whatever, that's fine. Like, fire me. I'll be good. I'll go to the next thing. And, when I had the opportunity to take over the program at Purdue, I was fortunate because my very first year I had an assistant. And it was the first time, like, I'd had interns I'd helped before, but now I have an assistant, Nicodemus Christopher. And, I love to kind of brag on now his success, because I think his success is bigger than my success at this point. Is he, at the end of our first year together, and he was, I think, 23 years old at the time, he took over as the director of men's basketball for the University of Tennessee with Conzo Martin. He ended up spending the next 10 years with Conzo Martin, and he just left last year. And now he's working very closely with Michael Porter Jr. And I mean, he's doing just incredible things. But the thing I did from day one with him was, first of all, if anybody referred to him as my assistant, I quickly corrected them. I say, he's not my assistant, he's my co-head. But I put him in the positions to be there before he got there, because I knew that was his path. And so my job was to help him outgrow me. My job was to help prepare him for the things that I was not prepared for going into my first head job, the things that, for whatever reason, being the assistant, maybe I didn't get exposed to, and to like shine the credit on him, but also to bear the weight, of if he did make a mistake. And I'll be honest, like halfway through that year, because I'm still proving myself, it was it was hard, man. It was uncomfortable. Like I questioned myself because I'm like, damn, is Nicodemus a better coach than I am? And like, frankly, probably he is. But also like some of our players and our coaches are looking at it like, man, we need to be doing what Nicodemus, says we're doing. Like Nick could be the head guy. But I just I went back to everything that Al taught me and everything that Al lived. And I was like, man, I'm comfortable in my own skin. If Nick's better than me and like Coach Painter decides Nick should replace me, then man, I am so excited for him because I also know I've helped put him in that position to do that. And I'm confident enough in my own self that I'll go get something else. Like I'll just go work for another NBA team or another college team, or you know what I mean? And just, but that positive sum mentality of like truly, truly rooting for other people's success. Life is long, man. It's a long game. And so like, what's wild is like now Nicodemus is someone who he's able to help me in my growth and my development just as much, if not more than anybody in my life. Like he's one of my biggest mentors, you know what I mean? And it's like, he was my assistant. And so I think when you take that perspective and you realize, a lot of time, like everyone always wants to look up, like to grow and develop and for mentorship. What I've realized over time, man, like some of my biggest mentors today are 10 years younger than me. You know what I mean? But it's just like, there's so much I can learn from them. And then, as you build those relationships and prop other people up, and just what you're doing is you're planting seeds and you're never asking for anything in return. You're just kind of giving. But it comes back around, man. It compounds. And now when you're in a position and you need help, or now you got this like army behind you where they're like, man, Josh did this for me. He did that for me. He introduced me to this person, that person. Josh, man, what you need, I got you. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, man, I'm still waiting for you to put out your leadership book. For all of us to check all that stuff out, man, for sure. Because obviously it's all real life stuff that really are applicable to everyday lives as leaders, for sure. So when that book does come out, I'm gonna need a signed autographed copy of this book, man.
I need you to help me co-write it, man. You got them journalism, school of journalism behind you. So
I feel you, man. We'll talk about that for sure. We'll talk about that on the side for sure. Everybody listening right now, you're listening to my guy, Josh Bonhotal. Josh, before we quickly briefly wrap this thing up, now you're doing other ventures now. You have a fitness app with called Future. Like you said, you're into the tech world now with venture capital. Talk about what led to these new movements that expanded you outside of the on the court experience with the gift that you have of strength and conditioning and strength training and fitness.
Yeah. I think it starts going back to especially Nicodemus. And what I just talked about is, I started really as a kid, my life and then my career of like a dream of, I want to play for the Bulls. And then that turned into, I want to work for the Bulls. But then also you get there and you realize very quickly, it's not about the destination. And so you learn to, and I think I was fortunate being pretty young to learn to shift my focus that it's actually about the journey. Because if you make it about the destination, if you make it about, I just want this job or that house, or if I, whatever, I win this championship or I'm an all-star, then you get there, you're going to find it's very deflating. It's very unfulfilling because you're sort of like, yeah, this is cool, but like, now what, And so, and also you realize the journey is what gets you there, like prioritizing the journey. And so what I found in my search from, starting out with the Bulls at 22 and realizing, man, I actually didn't set the bar high enough for myself and still kind of thinking it was a destination. I realized it was like, man, what I love, what's important to me is being able to help Nicodemus, being able to like get him and help elevate his platform and challenge him to dream bigger and think bigger and go achieve things that maybe he didn't even realize he was capable of. So it was, how can I build a larger platform for myself to do that for many, many more people who are all driven and chasing excellence, who they themselves are trying to create opportunities for others. You know what I mean? And it's like, the more I can create opportunity for other people who are trying to create opportunities for other people, you know what I mean? That's where it magnifies. That's where you can have kind of an impact on this world, in my opinion. And so that had led me down a path of like, well, maybe if I go be the GM of an NBA team, that's what will give me the play. And it was less about being the GM. It was more about the platform to do that. And, so kind of thought I was going to do that. It was like getting set to go to law school, ended up, having this opportunity to help build Future from the ground up, which, seemingly came out of nowhere, but because like I was recruited for it. It was a cold email. Like I didn't know any of my co-founders, any of that. But what you realize is like, and I talk about this a lot, is, luck is the residue of design. So it was a product of, helping a lot of people and, adding value to a lot of different people. It was really being present where I was, which I had to learn, especially while I was at Purdue. Like I was always like, man, I need to get back in the NBA. But then when I was finally present and I just focused on being the best where I was, doing the best I could every single day, what you find, and then show up each day, it puts you in a position where these like lucky opportunities come along. And then it's like, you got to be able to recognize that opportunity and make that jump. And as part of it, you're betting on yourself. And so having had that opportunity 4 years ago to go and at the time we're a tiny little seed stage startup called Future. We, didn't have a coaching team yet, which that's our whole product, is we pair you with these really high level coaches. In fact, 80% of our coaches have all coached at the professional, college, or Olympic level. So, I mean, it's big time coaches. And like going there, figuring out how this company could even work, and then building the team to do so. But I took that bet because I knew it put me in the room to make bigger things happen. And it put me in a room where now there's no longer a ceiling, which, in the sports world, as crazy as it sounds, there's a ceiling. It's like the NBA, as big as it is, you're still kind of inside of a box. Like the NBA is what it is, and so like being a GM, that's, kind of a ceiling. And in this world, being in a startup, being in tech, you realize it's like there's only a ceiling if you make one. And so kind of taking the same approach that I took even with because again, I started as an intern with the Bulls. And so from day one, I was like, okay, this is my shot. I'm taking advantage of how do I parlay this? And I just tried to add value to everyone around me. So like, somebody needed to run the clock for practice. Nobody wanted to do it. Like that job sucks. But I was going to run the clock and be so good that they could put me on the clock at the UC Game 7 of the NBA Finals, and I'm not going to make a mistake. And that's how I approached it, and like getting down on your hands and knees and wiping up sweat so that players don't slip. I approach that as like, man, it's on me if any one of these guys, like if there's a West, and so, but you take that approach, like whatever, if it needs to be done, then do it at, no matter how small the job, do it at a world-class level.
Right.
And that stands out. And now, also taking advantage of the rooms it brings you in. That was something that brought me in rooms with, people who are now investors or founders of companies or things outside of basketball. And just by like treating them right, building relationships, showing value, that opened a lot of opportunities for me. And so I kind of took that same exact approach with Future, is like, now, just as when I was with the Bulls, there's a lot of people who would never want to talk with Josh Bonhotal, just on my own, this kid that grew up in Lake Geneva. But Josh Bonhotal that works for the Bulls, I want to talk to that guy because he works, not because he's Josh, but because he works for the Bulls. But now that gives me an opportunity to get into a room with a CEO, with a team owner, with a GM. And now it's on me. And now if I can hold my own, I can connect with that person. Is everything I talked about with coaching. Build a relationship. Just get curious about that person, form a connection with them. Offer to, man, I was offering to help like $1 billion investors the first time I met them. We'll finish the call. Hey, like, just let me know, I don't know if I can ever help you, but please let me know if I can be a resource for you. And by the way, there's 2 people that I think you'd really like to meet that I think y'all might have some synergies. And, and so it's like literally, and because they're used to, I'm a $1 billion investor. Everyone they talk to wants something from them.
Right.
So like the fact that even, and I can't help these guys, like hopefully I can one day. But even the fact that I'm saying, hey man, like, how can I help you?
Right.
That stands out. And now also like people are watching you. And so now along the journey, you're building advocates around you. You're building people that they're rooting for you, man. They like you. They, maybe they met you when you were like, I got people I met when I was an intern. And at that time, I definitely could have done nothing for them, but I keep them updated on my progress. I try and check in with them. I try and share stuff I'm doing. And now you have all these people thinking of you, supporting you. And so, that was kind of the approach I took with Future. And then, now we're having success. Now we've raised a few different rounds of funding. In fact, we just announced our latest round. We raised $75 million in our latest round. We just formally launched a partnership with the Golden State Warriors and the New York Knicks. We're the official fitness coaching provider of both of those teams. We're getting ready to do a whole bunch more. KD's an investor in our company, like all kinds of different stuff like this. But like that thing doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
And, it was because behind the scenes, I'm doing these things, I'm building these relationships. It sets the stage where now you can strike where the iron's hot. And so for me, it was like seeing even beyond Future and realizing there's this whole other world of investing. So how can I get into that world? Because what I see is there's this whole space in human performance and the way we think about our day-to-day health, that is, going to completely revolutionize things of people living longer lives and better quality lives very differently than it's ever been done before by getting out in front. And through building Future over the past 4 years, now we kind of sit at the center of it. I've been able to kind of assert myself as a face in that, as the person who's built the team, as the person who's kind of helped establish the foundation for how we do that. And now as you see all these other really interesting companies, some older than us, like a Peloton or a Tonal,
Right.
and then also some of your wearables like a Whoop or an Oura Ring, they all kind of funnel into coaching. And so that was something like I saw an opportunity where it's like, if I can find a way to get myself involved in the other side of the table, now I can create even more opportunities because I can go and identify these really talented founders, these companies that can kind of improve our overall health as a population, and invest in them and kind of bring those people together. Because I think the thing, and this is where like my vision has changed so much from going from where I thought GM was the thing to now getting into this world where there's no ceiling. And what I've realized is like, man, there's a massive opportunity out there if instead of, and like I talked on before, instead of taking this zero sum mindset, which a lot of people do, where it's like, forget all my competition. Like I want to squash them, you know, and making about like, I'm just going to own the whole pie myself. How can I go and put myself in a position to bring all these really talented people together and brands and, you know, things like that?
Right.
Because if we come together, we can create a pie that's so much bigger. And even if individually our slices are smaller, our overall piece is way bigger than what it would have been, you know, had we had the whole pie. And when we talk about like our mission with Future ultimately is one day we're helping hundreds of millions of people. And, you know, my vision for that is like, I don't believe we do that on our own. I
Right.
believe we do that together, you know, and I use the kind of the example of like the Warriors is like, man, let's go be the Warriors and go get KD. You know, let's go get who are all the best people out there. Let's stack our team and like, man, let's go, you know, do something special. So you know, I think it was just kind of that mindset, having that vision, helping people along the way, adding value, asking, or, you know, asking and helping and giving more than you take. And it's just kind of, basically it's, and one of my buddies talks about this, but it's like increasing your luck surface area. The more
Mm-hmm.
you're doing this type of stuff, the more you increase like the surface area for like lucky opportunities to happen. And then you're essentially like engineering serendipity. And so that for me is like, you know, being able to like transition each role and now like still building Future, but creating this opportunity to get into the venture capital side of things. And what's really unique is it actually very much helps uh, elevate my impact with Future because it helps me get in the rooms with all these other founders that together can potentially help drive our initiatives with Future.
Nah, that's some really big time stuff, man. I'm sorry, and you know me, I've always been supportive of all the things that you're doing. I've been paying attention to what you guys are doing. Congratulations on all the success you've been receiving. I obviously hope more for you guys to come. And like I said, you know how we always do it. If I got help support in any other way, you know I got you. So I definitely appreciate you being able to do that. Share your story with everyone on the show. Before we get out of here, there is one thing that we have to acknowledge as Bulls Nation. Today, we are recording on Friday, February 25th. It is the day of Joakim Noah's birth. Joakim Noah's birthday is today.
My
Happy
guy.
birthday to Joakim Noah.
Happy birthday, Joe.
See, yeah, there you go. I know that's your guy, man. Just real briefly, just highlight, you know, a message you would send if you were able to see Joakim Noah right now or the Bulls Nation and talking about Joakim. Just a real brief message.
Man, it's wild because it comes full circle. But like Joakim's kind of private year-round trainer that was with him throughout his entire career is actually one of our coaches at Future now. And it's just, man, what's special about Joe is his ability to connect and bring together people, and just the way in which he's brought me into his family. And then now like we're all helping each other. I mean, it's just like, I don't know that I have the words for how special that dude is, but I love him as a brother. And you know, it's incredible because when we talk, you know, he's telling me how proud he is of me. You know what I mean? It's just like, that's special, man.
Nah, that's real. That's real. And I'm glad you were able to have that experience and exposure with Joakim as we honor and celebrate his birthday today. What do you have coming down the pipeline for our audience to pay attention to?
I think just pay attention to everything that we're doing with Future. You know, I think this is the year you're really going to see us on the map. Like I said, we're doing some of these different partnerships with NBA teams. We're launching a few podcasts. We just did a partnership with JJ Redick on his podcast to really highlight great coaches and what is coaching. But you know, I think that's the biggest thing is just, putting ourselves out there so that we can have this impact and people know that we exist and, and so we can just impact many more lives.
Where can everybody follow you on social media?
Probably Twitter's the best spot at J Bonhotal. I'm always trying to put out different threads and videos and stuff like that. And I'm actually launching a podcast here in the next couple of weeks, spotlighting a lot of our, yeah, man, I'm trying to get on your level. So just telling stories, and it's the theme, the through line is human performance, but it's, we have hundreds of coaches now with us at Future, just who come from crazy backgrounds, have trained unbelievable, people, and, have unbelievable stories themselves. So telling their story, telling kind of the story of Future through their eyes of, taking risk and making it through the dark moments and, betting on yourself and things like that. But then, also kind of what's ahead for the space. So I'm really excited for that. So you'll start seeing that on Twitter as well.
Okay. I'm definitely gonna be able to look up for that. Gonna hit the subscribe button and everything to make sure that you get the love that you deserve, my man. So I'm definitely going to do that. And obviously, everybody listening right now, you know where to find me on the Instagram and the Twitter, Josh M. Hicks Media, and follow War Media all over social media as well, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. You can find this episode also on War Media on YouTube. This will be on YouTube later this evening, so be on the lookout for that as well. And the podcast version of this, the audio version, you can also find on War on Anchor, all platforms, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, you name it. We are all over the place. My guy, Josh, man, I thank you for taking out the time of your schedule to talk to me and come back on my show. Really appreciate it. And we got to keep in touch because, we got a lot more things to talk about and plan about past this. So
absolutely.
Most definitely.
It's all love, man. Proud of everything that you keep doing. And, it goes both ways, man. Everything I can do to help.
Most definitely, man. I definitely appreciate that. You have a good rest of your evening.
You too.